Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
History is made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be talking about why governance and autonomy are keys to collective agility.
Sacrosanct agility. All our transformations aim to make our companies more agile, and the utopian promises of digital technologies as the source of all virtues are never far behind.
As though taking inspiration from agile methods for software development to resolve the problems of a Taylorist organizational model, which lacks flexibility, a prerequisite for our changing world.
If we move beyond this marketing pitch, why are governance and autonomy so important in the quest for constant adaptation? What's the story?
Let's make this simple. Agility is none other than the ability to constantly and quickly adapt to the changes we face. In other words, agility is continuous transformation.
But what does that mean in concrete terms? Companies are structured according to normed procedures derived from Taylorism because they need to be efficient.
So, it should work to say that adapting means adapting the collective processes to a new situation, except that in practice, it's far from simple, for two reasons.
First, because processes aren't always adapted to the real-life situations on the ground. Because they're too compartmentalized or designed too far from the point of application. Or simply because the reality in the field rarely has much to do with the way people in an office somewhere see it.
Plus, it takes time to change processes, especially in big companies. So, if changes are constant, quick, and brutal, there's no time to revamp the big machinery.
On the one hand, there are processes, which are often cumbersome, complex, and poorly suited to real-life circumstances.
On the other, there's the inertia of the huge cruise ship that needs time and distance to change headings. It can't turn the wheel this way and that, to surf the waves like a water skier.
So, there's only one option: adapt the norm to the context in real time, or as close as you can come. There are two steps to achieving that. First, collective decisions need to be made as close to the field as possible. And second, individual decisions must be possible to adjust the prescribed work to the situation.
The first step amounts to decentralization of decision-making. You have to accept that risks are being taken at a more local level.
And that requires thinking about the governance structure of a company. Big centralized companies which make decisions at their global headquarters adapt less quickly than local entities, which interact with the reality in the field on a daily basis.
It obviously takes longer to adapt when you have to climb all the way up a long hierarchy in a centralized company, unless you get going at a forced march, but that always results in collateral damage.
In other words, adaptation depends on making decisions closer to the field. It requires thinking about governance models and the decision-making process.
Then there's the second aspect, individual initiative. During the COVID crisis, for example, certain businesses were able to continue operating thanks to employees who took the initiative and made it work.
It worked thanks to the engagement of people who enjoy doing their jobs well, even if it means taking the risk of not applying the norm, process, or task exactly as prescribed. To cut to the chase, sometimes taking the initiative means going around your orders for the right reason.
So you have two options. Either you give employees this wiggle room, or you don't. In the latter case, employees have no choice but to do nothing, which doesn't resolve the problem, or to disobey their orders. But that exposes them to a different kind of risk.
Whatever their choice in that situation, they don't feel good about it, either because they can't do their job right, or because they have to be sneaky.
So, the key is leaving them some wiggle room for initiative within a set framework.
And that's exactly what we call autonomy. Freedom within a framework established by a manager who delegates a scope of responsibility.
Autonomy and delegating, management principles as old as the earth, though they may have been forgotten in some companies which took the Taylorist model too far and who are only now rediscovering just how necessary as they are in the quest for agility.
To recap, agility is a company's ability to quickly and constantly adapt. It depends on its ability to make collective decisions as close to the field as possible, as well as on its willingness to allow individuals to take initiative within a set framework. Agility comes down to a question of governance and autonomy. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short.
Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.